Imagine a weapon so strange, so ahead of its time, that it could stalk a tank, without a soldier ever pulling the trigger. No, this isn't a rocket launcher, it's not a booby trap. And it's definitely not something you've seen in a video game. During the early years of World War II, Soviet infantry faced a nightmare. German tanks were fast, coordinated, and practically unstoppable. Entire divisions collapsed under their steel treads. So when this photo resurfaced decades after the war, historians were stunned. What is this? A prototype launcher? A field-modified grenade? A complete mystery? The truth is far stranger than any guess, because this odd, almost improvised-looking tube was one of the world's first attempts at an autonomous tank-hunting weapon, a device the soldiers called the Bat. Oh, understand why the Soviets created something this bizarre? You have to picture the Eastern Front in 1941. Chaos, panic, entire regiments retreating under the overwhelming force of German armor. Anti-tank rifles bounced off the armor of newer German models. Molotov cocktails worked, if you were brave enough to get suicidally close. Soviet engineers were ordered to find anything that could stop a tank without sacrificing the soldier holding it. And that's when the Bat project began taking shape. This wasn't a launcher. It wasn't even meant to be held during combat. The device was planted in the soil, left alone, and waited. Inside this strange frame was an early infrared sensor. Primitive, clumsy, but revolutionary. It could detect the heat of a tank engine as it approached, and once the sensor locked onto that massive heat signature, the Bat armed itself. It didn't need a man, it didn't need a trigger. It simply waited for a tank to come close enough, then launched its charge automatically. Today, we'd call it a smart mine, but back then it bordered on science fiction. So, how did this strange machine actually work? At its heart, the Bat used a modified anti-tank charge. Typically, Soviet troops had to run right up to a tank and slap one of these onto the armor. Not exactly ideal for long life expectancy, but with the Bat, the explosive was mounted inside a tube-like launcher with two guiding rails. Think of it as a spring-loaded spear, except instead of being thrown by a soldier, it fired itself. When the infrared sensor detected a tank's engine getting closer, a small mechanical relay engaged the firing spring. The weapon snapped upward, launching the explosive charge toward the tank's weaker side armor. The sensor wasn't perfect. It didn't track targets like modern missiles, but it could sense a large, hot object entering its detection zone. And to a Soviet engineer in 1941, that was good enough. Placed beside a road or hidden in frozen soil, the Bat turned the battlefield into a silent ambush zone. No wires, no soldier nearby, just a mechanical predator waiting for a tank to wander into range. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't high-tech, but for the time, it was genius. But did the Bat actually make it to the battlefield? Surprisingly, yes. Soviet sapper units deployed early prototypes during the brutal winter of 1941-42. The idea was simple. Plant them along likely tank routes, hide them under snow or dirt, and let the device do the rest. In several reports, German tanks rolled over what they believed was empty terrain, only to be struck by an upward firing blast from the side, where armor was much thinner. Was the Bat responsible for all of these kills? Hard to say. Records were chaotic, reports often conflicting. But frontline accounts describe unknown automatic devices disabling tanks without visible mines or infantry nearby. Commanders liked the idea of a weapon that didn't need a soldier to die operating it. Yet the Bat wasn't flawless. Extreme cold could jam the sensor. Thick snow could muffle heat signatures. And a few unlucky Soviet trucks triggered their own devices by accident. Still, for a prototype built under the pressure of invasion, the Bat proved something extraordinary. Autonomous anti-tank weapons were not science fiction. They were possible. And once the Red Army realized that, they wanted more. If the Bat was so promising, why did it vanish almost as quickly as it appeared? The answer starts with production. The Bat required specialized IR components the Soviet industry could barely manufacture in wartime. Factories were being bombed, materials were scarce. Tanks, rifles, and artillery always took priority. And then there was the battlefield reality. The Red Army didn't need complex autonomous traps. They needed simple, cheap, instantly usable weapons. PTRD rifles, shaped charge grenades, and later the RPG-43 were easier to train, easier to carry, easier to mass produce. The Bat, in contrast, required careful placement, calibration, and luck. Too cold, and it wouldn't trigger. Too warm, and it triggered at the wrong time. By 1943, Soviet strategy shifted toward mobile offense. Fast advances, coordinated tank armies, sweeping counterattacks. Static autonomous mines simply didn't fit the new doctrine. So the Bat project was quietly shelved. Not because it failed, but because the war outgrew it. A strange weapon built for a desperate moment, and forgotten when the moment passed. But here's the twist. Even though the Bat disappeared, its core idea survived. A weapon that detects heat, identifies a target on its own, and strikes without human intervention. Sound familiar? Today, we call them fire-and-forget missiles. The Javelin, the NLAW, top attack munitions all rely on sensors and autonomous logic to pick the perfect moment to strike. And while these systems are far more advanced, the fundamental concept isn't new. In a way, Soviet engineers were already thinking along these lines more than 80 years ago. Autonomy on the battlefield, drones, smart mines, guided munitions, all trace their lineage back to early experiments like the Bat. Clumsy, fragile, unreliable, but visionary. A forgotten tube of metal in the dirt that quietly predicted the future. So, what happened to the Bat? Today, only a few photos remain and a handful of scattered documents. No surviving prototypes, no museum display, just a strange image of a soldier holding something that looks too unusual to be real. Yet this odd little invention captured something powerful. A moment when Soviet engineers reached far beyond what was expected, chasing an idea decades ahead of its time. It reminds us that history is filled with forgotten projects, abandoned breakthroughs, and weapons that were too strange or too early to change the world. And every once in a while, one photo is all that's left to tell the story. And if a single forgotten device like the Bat hid such an unexpected story, imagine what else is still buried in archives, waiting to be uncovered. If you want more hidden Soviet tech, lost war machines, and strange inventions history nearly erased, you know what to do. Stick around, there's a lot more coming.